Hey there, cats and kitties. I'm the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 10 of the anime series Beautiful Bones, Sakurako's Investigation. And this was actually a really interesting episode, one that kind of went against type from my own speculations as to the direction of the series. You know, I would have assumed that Sakurako's own internal investigations, the things that are more personally connected to her, would be coming to the forefront. And by the end of this episode, Tatewaki at least seems to suggest that this entire case does play into the wider sort of scheme that Sakurako has going on. But I never would have actually, put money on the fact that Isazaki-sensei would be the character through which we're seeing this all unfold and be explored, calling back on, if you look at the OP, I mean, there's a clear-cut case for his character where he sees some students coming into his classroom, and when he looks, he sees these three girls, and that's very much the sort of aspect of the story that was, it kind of took me aback a little bit, that one of these three girls, they were known as the three girls, but one of them had gone missing, and of course a guy got in between the other two, and we're seeing sort of the almost unsavory aspects of their family lives on both sides of the financial equation, the more rich and proper and thinking of status, and then much the lesser on the other accord. It's just very interesting to me, and I find myself wondering how exactly this is going to play into the grander scheme that are, more conforming to Sakurako's interests personally. And I can only assume it has to do with this painter, who we have a name for this character now, Hanabusa. And, it's interesting because we've seen this character a few times before. He seems to always be wearing a black trench coat and sort of a fedora-like hat, But in this particular case, it looks like the person is completely bald, clean-shaven, something along those lines. Whereas previously, we've seen this person with long hair. And even in the OP, at least, if you don't get a sense of there being long hair, you do see that the person has hair. And that's quite intriguing to me, and it does lead me to wonder if there is some overarching, bone cancer thing, something that is very thematically related to the idea of bones and the investigation of bones and, bodily remains, and how Sakurako herself, one of my earliest speculations was, could she know that her time in this world is soon to be over? Could it be something hereditary, some kind of disease, something that might relate to her younger brother, if her younger brother is in fact dead, and what took this younger sibling's life and all that kind of stuff? And one of my earliest speculations was, could she know that her time on this mortal coil is limited? Because there is that one line of dialogue from episodes back now, during the barbecue, which I talked about in my previous episode discussion video, where she says something along the lines of, I thought I would have had more time, or something along those lines. And so I've been wondering, especially with her going to her uncle, who seems to be bedridden and only able to communicate through a computer interface and everything, if there is some sort of hereditary disease that might be eventually, catching up to her, or that might have taken the life of someone close to her. And either she's trying to investigate what might have actually killed the person close to her, or what might eventually take its stranglehold on her own life. I don't know. I'm very perplexed by this episode for the fact that it's very much, Isazaki-sensei is the sort of central figure in amongst it. This aspect of this mystery where these girls are going missing, or at least one of them has, and the next one in the line sort of, out of these two who remain, has seemingly been brainwashed. She was the girl we saw at the tail end of the previous episode going out to walk her dog. We heard some fighting amongst the family relations, and she was just glad to get out of there. But it seemed like she was very much being influenced by whomever it was she was talking to, presumably this Hanabusa painter person. And the through line of the butterflies, as well as the paintings, I mean, the fact that these are all things that are, sort of in play, is very interesting to me. This particular kind of butterfly, Les Diana, or whatever it's called, being one that can be predominantly found going after animal remains. I don't know if that's every class of butterfly, but at least in this particular case, it seems that it is that particular class of butterfly that is catching everyone's interests, including this Hanabusa, whomever this person happens to be. Another speculation I have been talking about, time and time again, is could this character be the brother of Sakurako? They had a sort of parting of the ways, and she considers him dead because he's much more malevolent and sort of, wreaking through the chaos and subsisting off the chaos of bringing people about to their deaths and everything. I don't know. I wouldn't have expected this sort of turn of events, as I say. And I did like, however, calling back on the history between Kagami and Isazaki, calling back to that fair episode where basically you had that woman she assumed was committing suicide, and they pieced together that wasn't the case at all. She was essentially saying goodbye to a loved one that she had lost and moving on with her life. And I like that, Isazaki in that episode was very kind of, scolding toward Kagami. In her youth, she was very vibrant, very vivacious, and wanting to chase down this person whose life might have been tumultuous to the point where they might have been suicidal. And she was willing to go to the nth degree to try to prevent that from happening, and very much have the tables turned, and she's apologetic to him for having scolded him in return, and say, how can you be sort of dehumanized to this? Haven't you ever lost somebody personally? And now she realizes, well, this is something that's very personally affected him. He felt helpless as a teacher, as a guide to these children, and he had to fill that void with this, hobby of botany and taking care of these plants that would never leave him, that he'd never chance losing, and all that kind of stuff that Sakurako talks about. Psychologically, it's very interesting how it's all pinioned on that, on this sense of loss. And I really loved that communicative back and forth between Kagami and Isazaki, where she could feel better for it, because now she saw her influence positively affecting him in a very similar manner. He's not going to let this drop. He's going to chase it down with the help now, Sakurako and Tatewaki. They have hope to try to figure this out, and hopefully they can get there in time. As we see, there is a level of mutilation and sadomasochism in, this painter's, air quotes, using these girls as his subjects, as his models. But it's not just a matter of him painting them. He paints them in a very weird way, which the paintings themselves are kind of odd. But I mean, there does seem to be a scarring, as we see, on the back of the main girl in this episode, whose name escapes me. It's just really intriguing, and it's really kind of perplexing, and I don't quite know where this is going to go and how this is going to play in. As Tatewaki assures, as I say, as he's riding off, and he's just ecstatic that Sakurako is inviting him back for breakfast in the aftermath of this, and Sakurako has opened her home. I mean, very much clearly on display do we see how unsavory she finds both of these families on, as I say, either side of that poverty line. One very wealthy and pompous, one very much, sort of succumbed to poverty, almost in a ghetto sort of, framework, and being very unsavory as well, to the opposite degree. And yet Sakurako sees something about this case, something about this scenario plays into the wider view she has of some other aspect, whether it's to do directly with her brother, some kind of, in hereditary disease or fact, or something that we have yet to even perceive. And I have to almost put my money on it. It's something wider than we as viewers can even perceive as yet, because I didn't see this coming. Quite simply. Again, that Isazaki would be the through line and would be the main figurehead of this aspect of this mystery, which does have Sakurako's interest. And it does seem to conform to whatever her other interests are. And so it's really just going to be intriguing to get into the next, episode, or couple episodes. I think I said, these would be like the last 2 episodes of the series, but it could be a 3-parter. There could be one sort of finale episode that wraps all of this up. And whereas this mystery may be self-contained to these two parts, it may be spelling out the larger picture that hopefully we will finally get around to and figure out what this has to do with Sakurako, what this has to do with all these memories of her brother. Is it memories in the sense that she is feeling loss? You know, they bang on and on and on about that sense of loss and having to move on after suffering such a loss. But could there be, you know, that aspect of she's remembering and seeing visions of her younger sibling, if in fact that is this person and this person has passed on? Is it sort of the bell ringing for her own time being limited? And she's seeing the spirit who will welcome her across that, you know, sort of unearthly path. I don't know. I'm just out of like a complete loss to piece this together. I almost feel like I can't really speculate on where this is going to be going and whether or not this Hanabusa painter person is in fact the same person we've been following, or if it's somebody else that is, you know, being sort of red herringed into our view to lead us to believe it's the same person, or someone that is a disciple of that person. You know, how much broader does this get with whomever this manipulator, possibly killer, you know, having an effect on all these people's lives? How exactly is that going to play out? That's my biggest question by the end of this. So definitely a very intriguing episode and somewhat emotional in points and places and just very curious by the end. As Alice would have said, you know, curiouser and curiouser as we go down that rabbit hole. And I just can't wait to pick up with the next episode and see where it's going to go. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen episode 10 of Beautiful Bones, Sakurako's investigation, if you were as compelled by it as I was, if you were kind of as stymied as I was, that they would take it in this direction and bring Isazaki to the fore, finally touching base with that aspect of the OP, like I say, where you see these three girls, and you can see clearly on his face depicted in the OP that there's some sense of, you know, something left unfinished that is very much bothering him. And now, here we have the first part of a two-part story delving heavily into that, to my surprise and delight. And, you know, so anything goes in the comments below. Let me know what your POV is on this particular episode and where you think it might be going. Speculations are always welcome. Just love having that conversation. And so, yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.